And right now, we've got Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat from the Commonwealth of Virginia, joining us. Good morning, Merry Christmas, and Happy Holidays, Senator.
Hey, Brian and Larry. Good to be with you guys today.
You've been beating this drum for quite some time. It must have warmed your heart to hear a couple of prominent politicians, including the president, over the past few days, saying it's time for Congress to declare war or at least reauthorize the use of force against ISIS. Tell me what you want specifically to come out of Congress.
You guys are right. We should have done this before we got into it in August of 2014 for a couple of reasons. First, the Constitution requires it. We're not supposed to have a war without a vote of Congress. Second, when you have the debate and vote, that's the way that you educate the American public, and it's also the way that Congress and the executive kind of hammer out the definition of the strategy and goals. There's all this criticism. Well, the administration doesn't have a strategy. It's because we didn't do the work at the front end to clarify the strategic goals. And then finally, and this is the most important thing, you have a vote like this to show your troops you support them. You don't send them overseas and order them to risk their lives, and we've already lost 11 service members in this Operation Inherent Resolve, and 5 more have been wounded, and 4 hostages have been killed. If they're going to be over there risking their lives, I think they deserve to know that their political leadership is behind it rather than Congress trying to hide from a vote. So Jeff Flake and I introduced a bipartisan resolution in June. I had one last year that was voted on in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, but then it expired with no action last December. But Flake and I put one in to show it could be bipartisan, and yesterday 2 House members, one Democrat, Peter Welsh of Vermont, and one Republican, Scott Ridgell of Virginia, filed our resolution on the House side. So we now have a bipartisan, bicameral resolution that basically just is simple. It gives the president the ability to fight a war on ISIL with no restrictions, except there would be sort of 2 conditions. The first is a 3-year sunset or review period. Not that this would just take 3 years, but it is important to continually reassess, and it would require reassessment after 3 years. And second, while we don't tie the Commander-in-Chief's hands, we express a kind of a sense of Congress that significant use of U.S. Ground troops in combat against ISIL, except to protect American citizens, is not really consistent with the purpose for our engagement in this battle. Again, it doesn't tie the Commander-in-Chief's hands, but it expresses a sense of Congress, which is what we're hearing from people like General Petraeus and General Allen.
Really fast, Senator Kaine. As you know, the current operation and the deployment of troops are commanded by President Obama under the war authorization or the use of force dating back to September 14th, 2001, after the al-Qaeda attacks. What's wrong with that authorization? Why does it not apply now?
Yeah, big problem with that. It's a 60-word authorization passed, as you point out, September 14, 2001, that allows the president to take military action against those who perpetrated the 9/11 attacks. ISIL didn't form until 2003, and the RAND Corporation just did a big study of this and concluded, at best, it takes very significant, quote, legal gymnastics to connect this war with that authorization. The other thing is 2/3 of the members of Congress weren't here when that was passed, and so the overwhelming majority of the members haven't cast a vote to support this particular mission. And again, our troops over there deserve to know it. General Dunford, the head of the Joint Chiefs, said it would be very helpful to the troops to know that Congress was behind them by the passage of an authorization. It's helpful to our allies in the coalition, and we ought to send ISIL a message. The legislatures of Germany, France, Russia, and England have debated and voted to send ISIL a message that we're at war with you, but Congress has yet to do it.
In California, we had a terrorist attack. There's no doubt about that now, it appears.
Yes.
We know that there's another story in the news today that says that the folks from ISIS may well have the ability to print up with an actual passport printer fake passports. And that makes it very hard to identify who are the good guys and who are the bad guys.
Yep.
And there's also a debate going on right now in this country about what we should do about Syrian refugees.
Yes.
The administration says maybe we don't need to cut back on the number of Syrian refugees. Where are you on this?
Well, I think the refugee issue, I think that's kind of a misdirection. I think the refugee vetting process is already really tight, but I do think there are gaps, and I think we're going to address one of the major gaps with some tweaks to the tourist visa problem. We've allowed 2,000 Syrian refugees out of 4 million who have registered with the UN. We've allowed 2,000 into the United States, and it normally takes about 18 months for somebody to pass our vetting. That is, very, very safe and comprehensive vetting process. But 20 million people a year come into the United States without even needing visas because they live in one of the 38 countries where we have a visa waiver program. Many of the Paris attackers, for example, were citizens of France or Belgium and could get here without a visa. So I think what's happened is Congress has now realized maybe fiancé visas. The woman who was the terrorist in the San Bernardino attack came in on a fiancé visa. Maybe these tourist visas or student visas, they may need a little bit more tightening up. The refugee vetting process is one that I think is probably appropriately tight already.
And to those who would suggest we need to even go further and just have a temporary halt on all Muslims coming to this country, you would say?
I would say the First Amendment is a Virginia tradition. It was Jefferson who put it into the Virginia Constitution first, before it was the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, and said that we shouldn't be preferred or punished. No person should be preferred or punished based upon how they worship or not worship. And it's been a policy, kind of a radical policy idea that we've given to the world, and we shouldn't compromise on that by creating a religious test and saying all Muslims stay out.
Also in those founding documents, Senator Kaine, in the state of Commonwealth of Virginia, as well as in the United States of America, was the right to bear arms. And the president, according to some news reports, is readying some executive actions that could, many people believe, infringe on that right. Where do you stand on this? And do you think that he should not do an executive action? He should, in fact, go through the legislative process?
The Second Amendment is incredibly important, and it's a bedrock principle. But like every amendment in the Bill of Rights, it's not absolute. You guys are protected by the First Amendment in the freedom of the press, but you can't just libel and slander people without there being a consequence. So every right that we have usually also has some responsibility or appropriate limitation to it. I don't know what the president is contemplating doing by executive action, but I'm sure he's getting advice from a lot of lawyers what he can appropriately do and what would not be appropriate with respect to the Second Amendment.
Logically thinking, though, here, Senator Kaine, I mean, anything that he's going to do right now, he's going to say he's doing it for the safety of the American people. Well, if by if he could have done this by executive action for the safety of the American people for the past 7 years, why hasn't he done it? Doesn't it stand to reason that he's doing this now because Congress hasn't acted?
Well, I think that's part of it. It's that Congress hasn't acted, and also it's because of the accumulating weight of one horrible gun tragedy after the next. And the two most recent, the horrific shooting at the Planned Parenthood clinic in Colorado, and then the horrific shooting in San Bernardino. I think the president is contemplating this because Congress hadn't acted, and he's tired of again and again having to comfort grieving people and saying, why can't we do something?
You know these issues pretty well coming from Virginia.
Yeah,
you cited Planned Parenthood and you cited San Bernardino. Can you think of any gun control measure the president could pass via executive action that could prevent those crimes from happening?
Well, look, can I think of gun control that would prevent them or reduce them? Sure. Reductions in high capacity magazines would have a significant effect. I did some work on the background record check system in Virginia after the shooting at Virginia Tech that I did by executive order with the support of my Attorney General. He told me, he was a Republican, but he said, yep, you got the power to do it. And we fixed some background record check elements that makes the state safer. So there are plenty of things you can do that will make us incrementally safer. There's nothing you can do that will completely eliminate the prospects of violence, which have been since the start of the species, but that doesn't mean we can't make ourselves safer.
Good to have you on record, Senator Kaine.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks so much,
for
Senator.
Joining us.
Greatly appreciated.